I'm going to put my shouty voice on this morning so you can all hear me. My name is Hanson and I'm one of the members of staff here at Newcastle University, and I'm going to be doing various presentations today, but we've got a whole host of speakers throughout the day. I just need to go through some boring housekeeping with you to make sure you know where to go if there's a fire. When there's a fire? If there's a fire, the fire alarm will go off. It's a continuous alarm, and there's a couple of fire exits from this room, so it should be no problem for us to get out. The assembly point is just round to the right as we go out of the room. Phones, please turn them on to silent or turn them off if you can, please. And feel free to take phone calls outside if you need to do. The toilets, for those of you that's not found them, are just opposite this room. I believe the ladies is on the left and the men's is on the right. And smoking, Newcastle University is a non-smoking campus. So if you're going to have a cigarette, please can you be away from the buildings, we tend to say. You'll find that there's sort of smokers' corners in pockets around the campus. You'll notice that you've all been given a little funky device this morning, which we call a clicker. We're going to use these to get some of your opinions on some things to do with CPD, to do with open source throughout the day. So it's just a little bit of fun to keep it a bit more interactive. They're really expensive, despite them looking a bit like a bit of plastic. So please hand them in at the end of the day. And if you don't, we know who's got them, so we'll come and chase you for the money. So, to get us starting with the clickers, if you can all answer this lovely question: what did you have for your breakfast today? And you just need to select one of the numbers on your clicker. Have had cereal. Only 3% have had a fry up on a day like today. Which sector do you work in? Is it the public, private, education, voluntary or other? Again, I don't quite know what other is. Some people are not saying. Mostly public sector. I guess trying to find out how you can save some money in your organisation at the moment. Which category best describes your work? Is it GIS, IT, transport and logistics, planning, environment and conservation, retail, energy and utilities, engineering, property and construction, or other? Plenty of options. Right, thank you. Quite a spread. Thought we'd have more GIS. And how many people work in your team, in your organisation? One. Interesting. Right, you've also been given a little goodie bag this morning. And in there's actually a feedback form, so if you've got any specific inquiries or general feedback about the day, if you can scribble it down on there and then hand it in to us at the end of the day, or at any time during the day, and we're happy to receive those, please. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague and boss, Neil James, who's going to run you through the first session.
sorry, we have to put one of these on each overhead now, because once we get a new toy, we have to abuse it until we're bored of it. So, and I wrote this 2 days ago. I wasn't expecting the holiday in the sun to be in November and Whitley Bay. So, press 1 or 2, please, just to make sure everything's working. No, I shouldn't have thought so. I don't think that's right. Probably not. This one's all right.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, here's a serious question. How many of you use open source? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. There isn't a don't know, so you have to make a decision or not do anything at all. We all done? So, 56% of you don't, and 44% of you do, and 56% of you are lying, because you use it every day. Every time you open a website, you're going to be using open source software driving that website to deliver the content that you're using. My task is just to give you an introduction to what we'd like to call some frequently asked questions, but the 10 questions that comes to everybody's mind when you start talking about open source. So apologies if you're already a core developer on the Apache web server project and you've been developing in open source for years. So I thought I'd start off with the simplest question: what is open source? Because this is a question that taxes lots of people quite a lot about the exact definition of open source, but I don't think we should be too prissy about it. Open source means the software is free to use for whatever purpose you want to use it. Open source means you have freedom to access the source code that's available. So lots of software is free, but you don't necessarily see the source code. I'm a bit of an anal retentive with security, despite having a number of children who abuse the security on my PC outrageously. And I refuse to download anything pretty much unless if I'm trying to find a tool to do a particular job, the first place I look is for an open source tool. Because if the source is open, I know there's going to be nothing hiding in there, there's no nasties in there. Whereas if it's just an executable, I don't know that if I'm downloading something off the internet. Open source as well is free to modify. So you can modify the source code. Of course, it doesn't mean you have to modify the source code. If you just want to use it, like most people in the world, you can just use it. You don't have to modify the source code, but if you wish to, you can. But with that right comes a few responsibilities that we'll talk about in a moment. And critically, it's free to distribute. So if you make changes to it, you can distribute that however you want. If you want to add some content to it and redistribute it, you can do so, under no licensing restrictions that restrict you from doing that. So the next question you often get is, surely it can't really be free. Well, the answer is very simple to this. Is it all really free? Is of course no. It's not really free, because no software is free. What is free is the software itself to download and install wherever you want. All of those other costs associated with running software are still there. Training costs, support costs, development costs, maintenance costs, all of those are still there. A recent survey by OpenOffice, which is the open source Microsoft Office equivalent, suggests that in a company that spends about £1 million on office software, moving to an open source solution will save them between 20 and 30% of that budget. So it's not completely free, because no software is free, but the actual download itself, the actual installation, there is no license for it. Is reliability sacrificed for innovation? One of the worries that people have with open source software is this conception that it's a bunch of geeky blokes, and it pretty much is always geeky blokes. There are a few exceptions, but a bunch of geeky blokes beavering away, writing software, and what they're really interested in is cutting-edge innovation. They're not particularly worried about reliability. A survey in August this year by the consulting group Accenture contacted 300 large companies, both in the US and Europe, and asked them what their plans were with open source. And about 70% of them said they had plans to either increase, extend, or start using open source. And the main reason they chose for doing it was not cost, but reliability. That was the reason they were saying they wanted to move forward with open source. These days, open source tends not to be a bunch of people beavering away in darkened rooms eating pizza and Coke. Open source has proper development teams that are developing software just like all the other software companies. They're funded in a slightly different way. Their business model is dependent on services rather than selling product and selling licenses, but they still fund core development teams. And many of the geo open source projects that you'll be introduced today are developed in that way. There are core developers developing the product who sit in a company and are paid a salary to do so, and their salary is paid by that company providing services to others built on top of this product. So the answer to that one is no. That's a nice easy one. Can we trust it for mission critical operations? One of these overheads here said that 75% of organisations count Geo or GIS as a mission critical operation to run their business smoothly. And of course we're seeing more integration of GIS into the business world as Geo becomes a bit more mainstream. So can we trust this stuff for mission critical operations? Stuff that's developed in this manner and developed for free and provided for free. I took this off the internet last night, so it's very, very current. This is, as of yesterday, the numbers of, this is the percentage market share of all the accessible hosts on the internet. The blue line there is a product known as Apache. And Apache is an open source web server product, which is currently driving more than half of the websites on the internet, and significantly more than so many of the others, including Microsoft's Internet Information Services. So these systems already support mission critical operations. If I use open source, then anyone knows how our systems work. If I implement an open source system, people can look at the source code and work out how everything works. Particularly, I suppose, I'm talking about a back office environment here of servers and databases and all of that sort of thing. Well, one of the things about open source is it has many eyes. The source code is available there, and people can look at the source code. And that, rather than being a disadvantage, is of course an advantage, because bugs are spotted earlier. Security holes are found sooner because there are many eyes looking at it. And of course, an open source project doesn't have a bunch of marketing people there, say, worried about what the response will be if they say there's a security flaw with their system, so they try and roll it up in a patch in some other way. They tend to get fixed very, very quickly when these things are found. I'm worried about licensing. I don't understand how they're licensed. I'm worried if I start installing open source things, then I have to release lots of things back and everything is open. Well, the first point I'd make is